Tonight, we have three big stories. First, we are going to talk about why it may soon be easier for you to buy a house. You're not going to want to miss that. We're also going to hear what the former CEO and founder of Whole Foods is saying, what the true story was behind the Amazon buyout back in 2017. And we are only 1 week away from Halloween, so we know what that all means. It is going to be time to start talking Christmas. All that coming up. This is The Will Whiten Show. So first off, go ahead, hit subscribe, like this video, hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. I'd really appreciate it if you did that. It will help a lot for the YouTube algorithm. Let's get into the first story. This is from CNBC. It says lower mortgage rates push home sales up in September, but prices still stubbornly high. Let's get into it. It says the average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage started in July at 6.67% and is now at 6.17%. So down 0.5% there. Inventory rose 14% from September 2024. And you may already know that that inventory in general has been going up, quite the opposite of the COVID scenario when inventory was hard to find. And it says the median price of a home sold in September was $415,200, up 2.1% year over year. So things are starting to look a little bit better in the housing market. It's still not going to be what it was before COVID. The article does say that prices are still 53% higher than pre-COVID levels, and I would honestly never expect housing prices to go back to those levels. And we might start to see some movement. Now, obviously, we're getting into the colder months, so obviously the northern part of the United States, things may start to slow down. There's a quote from the National Association of Realtors, as anticipated, falling mortgage rates are lifting home sales. Improving housing affordability is also contributing to the increase in sales. So obviously, if the mortgages go down, your payments can be less, you can afford a bigger home, or if you couldn't afford a home, then maybe you can start to afford a home. Now, I don't think this week is necessarily the right time. There might be a interest rate cut of 0.25% next week from the Fed, so mortgage rates could improve even further. But keep in mind, this is against a backdrop of there's layoffs starting to hit the news. At the beginning of the week, we all saw that Meta had laid off 600 people from its AI unit. Target announced today that it laid off 1,800 people from its corporate office. There's been a slew of other layoffs going on. So people losing their jobs, interest rates going down, homes becoming more affordable because of that. So if you haven't had a home, now may be a good time. But obviously there's things to keep in mind, and I'll share some of the things that I kept in mind when buying my house. And that's obviously, don't get too far in over your head. I think there's a lot of people right now that are in houses and they are trapped. They are stuck in those homes. They have a mortgage rate that is 2% or so. And they know if they move, despite having, maybe they have a bunch more equity in their home than when they bought it, they know that they may actually have to trade down in home, whether it be size or quality or neighborhood. If they are to leave, they may know that they have to trade down. Now, obviously, with layoffs happening, and not in huge numbers, but enough to make headlines, some people may be forced to move. That could create opportunities if you're looking to buy a house. One other thing to keep in mind is obviously costs. Now, property taxes is probably the biggest driver. I know people talk about heating costs and whatnot. Graham Stephan has talked about before, depending on where you buy your house, if you were to get your toilet fixed, it may cost 3 times as much if you're living in a fancy neighborhood, whereas if you're living in less of a fancy neighborhood, you may get more of a normal price. There's generally a lot of extra costs that can pop up, but I think property taxes is still going to always be the driver of that. So the more square footage you have and the town that you decide to live in, that could really weigh on it. So make sure to always look past just what you would be paying on a mortgage payment. Try and look at the whole picture. And then I'd caution, no matter where you live, try and avoid keeping up with the Joneses. I see this actively in the neighborhood that I live in. There was that had put on don't want to call them awnings, additional roofs over their patios, built bigger decks. They look wonderful. There's a couple people that did it in the neighborhood. Within the following year, I want to say 6 or 7 more people did the same thing, right? They saw construction going on in other people's yards. They saw the trucks coming by. They're writing down numbers. They're getting estimates. And they're saying, hey, I think I might want to do that at my house. And 6 actually might be a low number. There's quite a few people that have done that. And I'm not saying that it's all just out of the need of keeping up with the Joneses, oh, I want to have this too because they have it. It could just be a genuine, hey, I think that's a good idea and I want to do that to my house too. So I'm not necessarily knocking these people for doing that. But I'm saying I think it was a noticeable trend. A handful of people did it, and they're very nice. They came out wonderful. We don't have that. I think it would be nice if we did at my house, but it definitely snowballed a bit, and many homes did that same thing, built those roofs out over the patio. So wherever you live, right, look out for what might be that thing. Look at, obviously look at what your neighbors are doing, but be careful if you then decide to do that. Make sure, of course, that you can afford it, and make sure that it's right for you. Make sure that you will really use whatever that home improvement or change is. So that's good news. Not too much else to this story other than things may be starting to look better in the housing market if you're looking to get a home, looking to change homes. If you're an all-cash buyer, it obviously doesn't affect you as much. One final note, it says about 30% of the sales in September were made all in cash. So about 30% of the people are just paying full cash. So keep that in mind. I think that's good to know. These come out about once a month, and I think it's a good idea to get a pulse on what the economy's doing. So let's get into our second story, and that has to do with John Mackey. He was the founder and now former CEO of Whole Foods, the grocery chain, the healthy food grocery chain. And it says, this is from Fortune, it says, former Whole Foods CEO says he didn't want to sell to Amazon, but activists threatened to take over his board, fire him, and sell the company anyway. John Mackey, the 72-year-old co-founder and former CEO of Whole Foods, disclosed the pressure campaign in an interview on the Habits and Hustle podcast with host Jennifer Cohen that was published earlier this week. And I'll give you the quote from the podcast. You're going to want to hear this. They basically said, this is Mackey talking. They basically said, and sorry, let me give background. Activist investors, right? This was a hedge fund that started to buy up shares of Whole Foods to then try and take control of it, to do what they say. They thought they could buy it at a good price and then either flip it to another buyer or make some structural changes to try and make more money on it to then sell their shares. So anyway, this is what happened. An activist hedge fund came in and met with him, and this is Mackey explaining how that meeting went. They basically said, listen, Mackey, here's what's going to happen. First thing we are going to do is take over your board. And once we do that, we're going to fire you. And then we're going to fire every one of your executives that doesn't do exactly what we tell them to do. And then we're going to just put you up for sale to the highest bidder, and there's not F word thing you can do about it. And then they walked out of the room. Wow. That sounds pretty brutal from John Mackey's perspective. And keep in mind, they're talking about a company that he founded and has run for decades. Now, he goes on to say that Whole Foods was actually starting to get into a poor position, reported declining same-store sales for 6 consecutive quarters. And they ultimately shopped around. He didn't want to be forced out, so he started looking for buyers. He reached out to Jeff Bezos, and they ended up making a deal. And some people will say that Whole Foods was the better for it. Prices came down. Employees started to get paid more after Amazon's efficiency magic was applied to it. And there's 2 lessons from this. And I'll just give a little bit more background on John Mackey as well. He has been interviewed and said that he is a hardcore capitalist, right? He fully believes in the capitalist system. he's a strong follower of Ayn Rand, who created the objectivist theory. So he truly believes in free markets, and this is the free markets at work. And the free markets, and this is the first lesson, the free markets can be vicious. What makes capitalism work is the allowance for rapid change, for customers to vote with their dollars that we like this product or we don't like that product. That's what capitalism enables. When you don't have that, you can start to have zombie companies, or large companies that might be propped up by the government, or are just allowed to suppress competition. And you can have these zombie companies that may hold monopolistic power and don't offer increasingly better services. And so this is actually starting to say that Whole Foods was in the position that it seems like they weren't adding as much value to the customer as they were before with their higher prices. There was a joke that floated around that instead of Whole Foods, it's called Whole Paycheck, because it costs so much to get your groceries from there. And what happens? The capitalist machine goes to work, and the shares were bought up. Activist investors came in, bought up the shares, and tried to force their agenda. They smelled blood in the water. And so, allowing the capitalist system to work, the customers were better off in this case. The employees were better off. It said employees got a raise and employees got to pay less. So it worked for them. But it's still a hard read, because keep in mind, this is how people were talking to someone who founded and ran a company for several decades. It's part of you at that point. I believe this company is part of John Mackey strongly at that point. And he's being told there's not a thing you can do about it. We will fire you. We will fire anyone that disagrees with us. And that's that. So the capitalist system, that's the first lesson. It can be brutal, but it can also offer positive change. But getting through that change is not always pretty. And so how can you protect yourself from change? Now, obviously, these shares were being bought by an activist investor, so it was probably public. And so the second lesson would be try and maintain control of your company. This is something that private companies will often advertise as a strength to being private. They'll say, well, we don't have the risk of an activist investor coming in and saying they don't like what we're doing. We also don't have the risk of reporting to the SEC quarterly and chasing those targets and being beholden to the market, and can take a more long-term view. That's what some private companies will say. Some public companies will say it's better to be public because then you have more access to the capital markets, right? When you're public, that means you're selling shares of your company to the public, right? That's through a process called an initial public offering, and that puts your shares out to the public. You get a windfall with everyone excitedly, hopefully buying your shares, and then you can use that money to fuel more growth. And sometimes you have to sacrifice that growth if you want to maintain control. You might have to sacrifice rapid growth. And I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing. It reduces the risk. Now, there are other structures. I'm not intimately familiar with the structures of how Whole Foods shares were set up, but there are some companies that do go public, but the shares don't quite have all the rights that you would expect of a normal share class, and so some won't allow full voting power. And so what you'll see some CEOs do, I believe Mark Zuckerberg did this with Meta, is that he will maintain a large voting percentage even though shares were sold. So even though those shares are out there, those shares can't necessarily be bought up and used by an activist investor to start voting on and off board members that can then control the senior management, right? If you're not familiar with the structure of a company, we can talk about the structure of a corporation real quick. But you have employees, and they're reporting to your middle managers and your C-suite, the chief executives of the company. And those are the senior managers. And those senior managers then report to a board of directors. Now, boards of directors are typically made up of retired, experienced chief executives, chief financial officers, right? Chief operations officers. So if someone has been a senior manager for decades and decades, and they have many connections, and they retire, or even before they retire, they'll start to become board members of other companies. And it's a pretty good gig. When you're a board member, I'm sure the average pay is a lot higher now. It's several $100,000. I remember 10 years ago it was probably about $400,000, so it's probably a lot more than that now. And it depends on the company. So Apple board members get paid very well, probably millions of dollars a year. Whereas other smaller companies won't get that same level of compensation to be on the board of directors. And they meet once a quarter and they get reports about how the company is operating. And this can happen in public and private companies. They get reports on how the company is operating. There's an audit committee to make sure that all of the numbers are being looked after appropriately by an accounting firm. Any risks are being raised to the board. And ultimately, they're looking for reports from the senior managers that say the company's headed in the right direction. And if the company's not headed in the right direction, the board of directors can say, yeah, we don't think you're going to keep running this company. We're going to find someone else. We're going to promote within. We're going to grab someone from outside. And so then really, who do the board of directors report to, right? As we move up the stack, employees, middle managers, senior managers, right? The C-suite, the chief executive, chief financial officer, operating officer, marketing officer, technology officer, right? Board of directors. The board of directors is acting on behalf of the shareholders. Okay, so those are the people that own the company. Now, what can happen is to own enough of a company to have a say takes millions and millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, in order to own enough of a stake in a company to yourself make a decision to make a change to the board of directors that would then push your policies as an investor, as an owner of the company. And so if you own mutual funds, if you put your money into a mutual fund, I should say, or if you're a qualified investor, which means you have a lot of liquid assets, you put your money into a hedge fund, those funds invest the money into companies on your behalf, and they also vote on your behalf for these companies. So if you own a share of a company, you might get an email once a year that says, hey, we have this vote coming up, please click here to vote. If you put your money into something like a mutual fund, you don't get those votes. The managers of the mutual funds handle those votes for you. They try and act in your best interest and direct the company how they want to. And so in this case, it was a hedge fund that had pools of investor money and bought significant chunks of Whole Foods, and this is all back in 2017, and came in and imposed their will. And they said, we now own a significant stake of the company. You're going to do what we say. And that's how the corporate structure works. And if you love capitalism and you love the capitalist system, there's good and bad that goes with it. They could have been nicer, of course. The hedge fund could have been a lot nicer in doing it, but to them it must not have mattered. Time is money, and they wanted a return on their investment, and they spelled it out to him. They spelled it out to John Mackey. So I believe he continued to work at the company after it was sold to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And I remember when this news story hit back in 2017, it mentions that the acquisition wiped out an estimated $22 billion in market value from competing grocery retailers' stocks in a single day. So everyone said, oh my goodness, Amazon is getting into the grocery game. This is going to be awful for the rest of us. And the rest of us meaning the competing supermarket chains. And the investors of those companies said, "Oh no, I might have bet on the wrong horse. I should have been owning Whole Foods, not insert other grocery chain name here." And so while John Mackey doesn't like the approach that happened, he still thinks that it was the best solution, is what he says. And so I'd say don't forget the lessons that we're going to take away from this, which is if you find yourself in a position of running a company, try and maintain control. And that could come in the form of not giving ownership to others or not taking on a lot of debt. Because if you take on a lot of debt, then that's a way of giving some control to another entity, in that case, a bank, as opposed to an investor. Try and maintain control. And you may have a better shot of something like this not happening to you. And understand that this is part of capitalism. That's the other lesson. That this is part of that. And change can be good. Change can yield better results, like it did for the customers and employees in this example. But change is hard. Change will always be hard. So let's get to the final story. This is the Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog has been released. So again, we are 1 week away from Halloween. I've already started to see Christmas stuff in stores, believe it or not, before Halloween is even done. And I can almost promise you, as soon as the clock strikes midnight on October 31st, all of that stuff will be moved, all of the pumpkins, to the clearance bins, and the way will be cleared for every piece of Christmas paraphernalia that you can think of. Neiman Marcus here is obviously getting a jump on things. We're going to do a bit of a lightning round here, and we'll see how quick we can go. I'm going to give you a buy or don't buy on this outrageous fantasy gifts for 2025. This is Forbes helped compile this. And I'll give you a quick background. It says it all began in the early 20s, that's 1920s, when Neiman Marcus started sending small holiday catalogs to their clients. But it wasn't until 1959 that the Christmas book started to make headlines. That year, Stanley Marcus and his brother Edward wanted to create a publicity stunt to increase business. So that's what it is. This is a publicity stunt. I believe you can actually buy these things. They're going to be very expensive. I'll let you know that up front. Just for example, the first thing for sale was 2 matching Beechcraft airplanes for $176,000. That might be a buy. I didn't start the lightning round yet, but that might be a buy. Some of the other highlights of the past: His and Hers camels, live camels, 1967. Robots, 1986. There's no pictures for these, but we will get to pictures. Hot air balloons in 1968, and even a 2,000-year-old Egyptian mummy case, which was purchased by a California museum. Some gifts were outrageous and never sold. A 1970 replica of Noah's Ark, complete with animals, $588,000, and a $20 million personal submarine in 2000. So you can see where this is all headed. One more, a 6.7 Bell helicopter did sell in 2001. Okay, so we're going to get to the pictures, and we're going to try and do lightning round. We're going to give a buy and don't buy rating on these, and we'll see how it goes. So the first one, I'm going to hold this up. It is a Christian Louboutin custom saddle for $47,000. I can't hold it up if I flip it over. For $47,000. And if you understand already, I'm running a bit of a Clint Eastwood operation here. For those of you that know, Clint Eastwood was notorious for producing his films under budget and done often with first takes. He did not waste time doing multiple takes. So again, I'll let you get one more look at it. That is the saddle for $47,000. Let me see if I can give you some background on that before we go to the next. It's already a don't buy for me. It is one-of-a-kind Western saddle, created in Paris, handcrafted, 100 hours of meticulous work, 17,000 crystals, along with 155 polished spikes borrowed from the popular heels and handbags. So look, if you're an equestrian, if this is your world, this may be a buy for you. I am not, so that is a don't buy for me. The next one, Crayola masterpiece personalized for your pet. Take a look at that. These are Crayola crayons used to make sculptures, custom sculptures of your dog or pet. I guess it says pet. All the examples look to be dogs, but it says for your pet, $64,000. So I have to say, I like this. I don't have a pet. But people who have pets tend to really love their pets. And people with a lot of money and pets like to spend on their pets. Even people without any money like to spend on their pets. I think this is a good business. I wish this is a business that I would like to be in. Although it sounds extremely painful to cut all of these Crayola crayons and glue them into the shapes of dogs. If I had $20 million, and a family member that loved their pet dearly, I would pay the $64,000 so that they could have this and they could put it on display in their home for eternity. So that's that. If I had the money, if I was willing, yeah, that's a buy for me. Okay, the next one, it is a Kiton bespoke trunk. I believe Kiton makes suits. And a trip to Naples for a custom wardrobe, $180,000. This is a don't buy. This is a don't buy for me. It looks like a nice trunk, and the clothes look nice and everything, but I can't do it. $180,000. I would just say take the trip to Naples. I'm sure it's a very nice trunk. If clothes are your thing, then that's for you. Then that would be a buy for you, not for me. This one, a Christoffel Paris getaway. Okay, so a trip to Paris and an exclusive mood flatware egg, $185,000. $185,000 for silverware in an egg. This will also be a don't buy for me. You get to go to the crafter's place. They've been doing things like this since 1830. No doubt, I'm sure the craftsmen are very skilled. I'm sure this is very beautiful. But it is not up my alley, at least for now. Maybe my opinion will change in the future. But that is a don't buy. Next one, luxury expedition from Yellowstone to Amangiri, $490,000. This is a trip from Yellowstone to Amangiri. For those of you that don't know, Amangiri is a resort, I believe, in Utah. Oddly enough, I have heard of this. I used to think I knew what an expensive hotel cost, several $1,000s a night or something like that, until I looked up the Amangiri Hotel. The lowest possible price I could find was $6,000 a night. $7,000 to $9,000 was more typical. They even have a home that you can rent for $25,000 a night. Again, this is in Utah. It's a desert scene, as I showed. I'd like to go there. If I had $20 million, I would put this on the list too. It looks very nice. It's one of those things. It's one of those things that when you see the price tag, you say, "But how? How could it be worth that?" It's almost, the price tag is almost part of the marketing, because then it's piqued my curiosity. What on earth goes on at Amangiri that I could pay $490,000 to first go to Jackson Hole and then down to Amangiri in Utah? I'm curious. If I had the money, I'd be Amangiri bound just to see what it's about. Annie Leibovitz portrait session, $500,000. There's not a picture on this. Well, actually, it was just a picture of her. That's right. $500,000, rare opportunity to become part of cultural history. This true fantasy gift offers a private 4-hour portrait session in Leibovitz's New York studio. You are welcome to include your family in this experience for the ultimate Christmas card. Greeted with champagne, followed by creative consultation with Leibovitz herself. A professional styling team will prepare you as the photographer sets the stage. This is already a don't buy for me. If you're a fan of her, work, no doubt, I'm sure she's very talented, then maybe this is for you, not for me. You also get 100 autographed copies of her new book, 4 signed volumes of her collected works, 2 signed exhibition prints, and you'll meet with her editor and explore the making of Women, which is her acclaimed portrait series. So that's a don't buy for me. $500,000 for a photo shoot. I don't know. The next one, Four Seasons inaugural yacht voyage, $115,000. There is the yacht. There is the yacht. I'm going to say that's a buy for me. Oddly enough, I was talking with a friend about I believe it's St. Regis cruise line. First of all, some background. I've not been on a cruise. I'm pretty sure I've not been on a cruise. Regardless, I don't think I would go on a cruise. I do not drink. I don't gamble. And I eat fairly healthy. And from what I understand, cruises have unlimited alcohol, unlimited food, which is mostly not healthy for you, and a giant casino. I believe these are the anchors. Aside from the actual anchors, these are the anchored events and venues on a cruise ship. And then in the meantime, your children can swim in the pool, and I'm sure they have shows and whatnot. I'm talking about cruises in general. It's never really appealed to me. Perhaps if it was going somewhere that was that had a very beautiful landscape, Alaska, I might sign up for a cruise. The Norwegian fjords, I might sign up for a cruise, especially if it was on the Four Seasons inaugural yacht voyage. I think this is a good business to get into. I think this is smart of Four Seasons. St. Regis, I'm pretty sure it's St. Regis, has been doing this. I've been to a Four Seasons hotel before. It was very nice. I think they know how to do luxury. They look after the details. And I'd go back if I was willing to spend the money, which I'm probably not willing to spend the money right now. But I think this is a good business to be in. And I'll take a moment here before we get back to the lightning round. There's one more item. I'll take a moment. Yachts, super yachts, boats in general, which I heard is actually an acronym for bust out another 1,000. And you can tell where I'm going with this. These are very expensive to own and operate and staff. They're insanely expensive. The super yacht owners of the giant yachts are billionaires. If you want a moderately sized yacht with probably a couple staterooms, I'm making this up. I would feel, I'll just say it from my perspective, I would probably feel comfortable if I had at least $100 million. That is when I would feel comfortable to spending $5-10 million on a yacht. I would probably need to see at least $100 million in my bank account to do that. Because I know the amount of time that I will spend on that versus the amount of money I paid will be an obscene per night rate. That would be an obscene nightly rate. And so what can you do? If you're not going to buy your own yacht, you can charter one, which is also incredibly expensive. So what do people do? They get their friends together. They try and spread the cost around. It is very expensive. And so why not, if you have a couple $1 million and you want a once-in-a-lifetime high-end trip, or if you have $10-20 million and you want to do this regularly, why not? Why not go on one of these luxury cruises? There's only 95 suites. So this isn't going to be 4,000 of your closest friends on a mega cruise. There's only 95 suites. And a third of those people, your schedules will probably never align with. You probably won't see them. So it's probably going to feel pretty spacious, I would think, in terms of other people. The rooms may be cramped regardless, because this is a giant boat in which we're trying to put people on. But I think this is a good business. I think it's smart of Four Seasons. I'd like to see how this goes. This would be a buy for me, as long as it's to a beautiful destination. I don't want to sit out in the Atlantic or Pacific for 4 days with water just around, not being able to look at anything. All right, and the final one is a baby Bugatti. I do not have a picture for this. Bugatti, obviously a supercar. They're making a baby one for $135,000. It is a copy of a 1924 Grand Prix car. This one will be electric, and it is at 75% scale. Luscious white leather upholstery, a limestone effect dashboard inspired by the marble floors of Neiman Marcus's Dallas flagship. Each car includes a custom commemorative plaque and custom color detailing. Don't buy. I wouldn't do that. I would not buy the $135,000 electric small Bugatti. I'm sure it looks very cool. I'd like to look at it. I'd like to see a full picture of it, but I would not buy it. That ends the lightning round. Go ahead, put in the comments section what you want from the Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog. It is not even Halloween. Neiman Marcus has got to jump on it. Put in the comments what would be a buy for you, whether it's on their list or from our first article, if you would just buy a house. Have a good night.